My story begins with gibbets. If you're not familiar, gibbets are the tiny decorations that are made for Croc shoes, and at the URJ Eisner camp, they are currency. Gibbets can be traded for candy from canteen, assistance with a bunk chore, for a better shower time, or even just traded for another gibbet. As I entered a bunk of rising fifth grade girls on one of my final nights at camp, I was immediately invited to join a few campers in their counting of the gibbets. Now, unlike the counting of the Omer or the counting towards Elul, which I'm much more familiar with, this counting involves laying your massive pile of gibbets out on the floor of the bunk and discussing each one of them in detail. The one that looks like a melting ice cream, the one that's an emoji silly face, or a heart, or the bucket hat, or the flower, and so on, and so on, and so on. And as these campers compared their collection, they discovered that they each had a gibbet that looked like a gummy bear, but the glittery one was clearly superior to the non-glittery one, as a trade of these was rejected by the glittery gummy bear owner. I'm sure it will not surprise any of you that I felt completely comfortable in this moment. Even as more campers gathered around to discuss the gibbets, it didn't faze me to be the only adult while the counselors were out at a meeting. I felt completely at ease. Or at least I was, until one question surprised me. Triple R, that's what they call me at camp. What is that necklace you're wearing? I think all the faculty have those. What is it? She was referring to my Bring Them Home necklace, the one I haven't taken off since our synagogue mission to Israel in March. I took a quick breath to center myself and showed the necklace to a different camper, asking her to read the words to her bunkmate. It says, "Bring them home now," she told her bunkmates. The campers all looked at me inquisitively. "It's for the Israeli hostages who are still in Gaza," I explained. "I will wear this until they all come home." And with that, the floodgates of 10-year-old questions was open. Isn't that all better now? Are they still fighting? Why did some hostages get to come home, but not all of them? When will they all be home? Will Israel win this war? Why are they fighting anyway? Who started it? One after another, I carefully answered each question with language and examples that older elementary school students could understand, while being honest, articulate, and at times emotional. I said, "I don't know," sometimes, and "it's really complicated, but let me give you some basics," other times. On and on and on, until I glanced at my watch and realized we had been talking for 45 minutes, and these campers were supposed to be in their beds with the lights off by now. When I finally left Bunk 13 that evening, I was exhausted, mentally and emotionally. But more than that, I was worried. When was the next time those campers would have a chance to ask such thoughtful, important questions about what is happening in our homeland? Who would be the next adult that they would feel comfortable asking and that they would trust to give a real answer? During my 2 weeks at camp, this was not the only conversation I had about Israel, and it was not the only age group I spoke with. 10-year-olds were not the only group of campers with poignant, perceptive, and powerful questions about not only the current situation in Israel and Gaza, but also the history of the land and our people's relationship with it. Regardless of their age, Each camper I spoke with knew some information, but desperately wanted to know more. They grappled with everything from the seemingly simplistic, when will the war be over, to the more ethical, existential examinations of what it means to be a Jew and a human being. If you listen to the questions coming out of the mouths of babes, really hear what is lurking beneath the words, you will find yourself in a state of shock and pride. I was, when one 15-year-old camper shared his struggles with the reality of war in front of his entire unit. I saw this video, he began. This Israeli girl, Shani, look. She was kidnapped and tortured, and then they marched her bloody and beat up through Gaza, and people were cheering. It was so ugly. They cheered that she was being taken hostage and that she had been tortured. And now it's really hard for me to feel any kind of sympathy or compassion when people in Gaza are killed by Israeli forces. If it had been appropriate to run over and hug him, I would have. Instead, I simply sighed and said, "Me too." This courageous teenager was struggling with the question of our sages in a place where there seems to be no humanity. What does it take to be human? Later that day, I instead hugged a colleague, and I wondered, how long had that teen been holding that question, that struggle inside himself, with no one to talk to? Our children have so many thoughts and emotion, more than many of us give them credit for, and they are not alone. We also have complicated, unanswerable questions. We also worry for our people and the state of the world. We are also challenged by the concept of an ethical war while being bombarded with pictures of destruction and a life that none of us would want to live. We are also walking around with a strange mixture of fear and pride, trying to figure out how the world came to be such an inhospitable place for our people. But instead of sharing our thoughts, our feelings, our questions, or even our opinions with our children, we are all too often silent. Too many parents and trusted adults have chosen to ignore the world around us when talking to our kids. We turn off the news when they are in the room, or we choose to sit in the front seat and whisper, falsely believing that then our kids will not know what is happening. Sometimes we put that responsibility on others, teachers and friends. We hope to shield them from the world, from the sadness, the hatred, the death, and destruction. But in reality, what we shield them from is the greatest gift we could give them: knowledge and the power to ask questions. I know it's hard to discuss Israel, the war in Gaza, and the rise of anti-Semitism all around us. We worry that we will be unable to restrain our anger, that we won't have age-appropriate answers or language, or maybe we are simply at a loss for words. But whatever the reason, we, the parents, the trusted adults of our youth, aren't talking about Israel and the current situation there with the youth who need us too. Our dinner table conversations do not include the history in the land, the history of the conflict, the events that are unfolding, and that is leading our children to feel ill-equipped, insecure, and disconnected from the land that God promised to Abraham, to our people. Our silence has done the opposite of what we would have hoped. Our children have lost the ability to safely ask us questions and are holding in the emotions that we had hoped they would not ever know, let alone feel. I do not believe in sheltering our children. I believe in bringing them into the conversation. Yes, it is going to be a different conversation for each child, one that takes into account their emotional maturity and ability to understand complexities. But there is a way to have this conversation with every single child. It's time to talk about this: Israel, Gaza, the conflict, anti-Semitism, more. We must normalize this conversation without bias, give our youth facts, and say, "I don't know," when we truly do not know the answer. Tell our kids what other people think or say so that they become familiar with other tropes and rhetoric. Let us help our children to feel comfortable talking about not only this challenging topic, but so many others. Let us be the parents who enable and empower our kids by showing them that we trust them to handle the adult conversation. Our children are not too young, not too fragile, not too naive to grapple with the situation in Israel. They are not too immature to discuss mature topics. They are not so weak that they will be crushed by learning about how our community is stuck between a rock and a hard place. They will not lose faith when they are faced with the reality of an imperfect world. I have seen time and time again that when we are honest with our kids, they do not walk away from their Jewish identity and community. Rather, they double down on their connection. As I left Eisner camp at the close of my 2 weeks on faculty, I heard the words, "Oh, Captain, my Captain," over and over again in my head. For those like me who will always think of Robin Williams as the courageous, unique, radical, and unorthodox John Keating, you know that part of what made that character so remarkable was his ability to not only connect with his students, but to be honest with them, to respond to even their most ridiculous questions with respect and clarity. For me, Keating has always been a role model because he never shied away from a topic, no matter how challenging or emotional it was. "Oh, Captain, my Captain," his students cried, because he guided them through choppy waters without trying to go around it for the sake of their youthfulness. Our job as educators, as role models, as parents, and as trusted adults is to help our children wade into challenging waters and struggle with the high tide of life. Sure, it's easier when the water is low and calm, but if we only teach them how to handle life in the shallow end, they will be unprepared to handle the tsunami that will inevitably reach their shores. Let's not shelter our kids from the world by helping them to navigate it so that they can become advocates for themselves, for the Jewish people, and certainly for Israel. We owe ourselves the freedom to have deep, challenging, thoughtful conversations with our kids, and our children will be honored to have more and more people that they are ready to stand on a chair for and cry out, "Oh, Captain, my Captain." Shabbat Shalom.